Well, I'm here in my music studio, and today we are going to begin a series of basically theory lessons. And this is going to be about what we call rootless jazz voicings. So there's some basic stuff that you guys need to know to really be able to follow along with this little mini series that I'm creating. Incidentally, I'm writing a book about this very same thing, but what we're gonna do is less in depth, and it doesn't really offer you, it's not gonna offer you much material. In the book that I have songs that I've written that basically graduate from what we call A into B voicings, and we'll get into that at some point, but probably not today, at least not very in depth. Not today. So things you're going to at least want to know basically how to do. Number one is definitely music reading. Music reading is a big thing. Now, I will be talking about the tones in question. I will be playing music. I will be playing the different cadences, but really it would help you a lot to follow along if you could read music. But if you can't, keep watching because it's not rocket science. Number two is going to be scales. Now, I'm probably going to basically use, C, G, D, A, not just as a chord progression, but we're also going to look at those scales. We won't really be getting into flat or sharp scales that much, but you may want to just go on the internet and find something that just has all the 12 major scales. So let's begin. So here I have just some blank manuscript paper, and I'm going to basically be drawing this stuff out, and I will also have, again, as mentioned, I will also have audio demos for you. So first, we're going to talk just about some basics. If you just read treble clef, it's not a big deal. My bass notes are 9 times out of 10, or I'm sorry, my bass clef notes are 9 times out of 10 going to be just the root notes, just the bass notes. So we're going to start just with triads, and hopefully you guys know that a triad is just 3 tones. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a classic 2-5-1. We're going to do D minor to G to C. Now, I'm just going to draw this in one way, or write it rather in one way. Wow, that was terrible. Been a long day. There we go. D, G, C. Now, I'm just drawing these as note heads because they're not going to have any duration or anything. So since this is all just academic, we're not going to bother with note duration. I'm not even going to make them whole notes. So D minor, its root position, well, here's our list of D minor, G to C. So I'm just going to write all these in root position, and then we're going to do some alphabet soup. So root position in music just means that whatever the chord is called is on the bottom. So here is G, so that's going to be G, B, D, and then C is C, E, G. Now, to find a chord, and this is slightly remedial, but to find a chord, all you do is you use tones 1, 3, and 5 of its scale. So here we have the key of G, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. And tones 1, 3, 5 are G, B, and D. Okay, so that means that that makes up the major chord, and this works for every scale. So the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, C is 1, E is 3, G is 5, okay? Now, the minor, of course, in D major we have F sharp, so I had to lower it a half step because this happens to be D minor. So now I have just the basic triads. So I'm going to start in root position for D minor, just to make things easier. Now I have to go to some form of GBD. So I already have D on the bottom, of my right hand voicing, that is. So we're going to leave that D there. I'm going to move the F to G, and then I'm going to move the A to B. And again, you could do these in different combinations, but this is just in the interest of this exercise. And then I'm going to make C root position. This isn't going to sound the best, but it'll give you an idea of basically the rest of what we're going to do. Going to create a little foundation for you. So here in the key of C, this is D minor, G to C. And I just put C colon because that means that we're analyzing this in the key of C. That's all that means. So now what we're going to do is we're going to figure out the tone numbers in these scales' own keys, meaning we're going to analyze the D minor in the key of D minor, or in the, actually, this is why I never use pen. We're going to do it in the key of D major. So it will not be minor. Sorry about that, folks. So 1, D is obviously 1. The F is 3, really should be F sharp, remember? And the A is 5. So in the key of D, we've used tones 1, but we've of course flatted the 3rd because it's minor, and then we're using the 5th tone. Okay, not rocket science. So now here in the key of G, we have I'm going in the order of lowest tone to highest, so basically left to right. So here I have 5 in G on the bottom. I have 1, of course, because G is the tonic. And then I have 3 on the top. Okay, and then here I have just root position C, and root position C is always going to be 1, 3, 5. Now you could think about the inversions here, but it really doesn't matter. Like this one is in root position, this one is in second inversion, and then that one's in root position. But it really doesn't matter because we're not really dealing with voice leading right now. If I was dealing with voice leading, I would probably write this last chord this way, E, G, C, just because it will move nicer from that. So let's play a demo. So the first demo will be just going back to the C position. And now my second demo is going to be D, G to this inversion of C over here. Incidentally, that nicer version of C we would call 3, 5, 1. Okay? So, yeah, all we did was we just looked at these chords in their own keys, if you will. We looked at it a macro way. We said, okay, we're in the key of C. We're doing a D, G, C, a 2, 5, 1 cadence. And I just filled in the blanks, basically. And this is more or less what jazz is. It just uses a hell of a lot more voicings. So let's go ahead and we're going to alter our chord progression. We're still going to use triads. Even though this is a little bit remedial, it will help you overall in the grander scheme of things when we start looking at jazz voicings, which we will today. So let's say I want to change things up a bit. Let's say I want to do some kind of a C minor cadence. Actually, that's a bad example. So in classical, reason being, in classical music, you normally analyze things in minor if it is minor, but in jazz, we don't really do that. We always look at things from a standpoint of the major scale. So if we're talking about, well, let's use the example that I was going to use, C minor, like D minor, flat 5 to the G. We'll use this too when we make our triads. But so in the key of C minor, you know, this would be 1, and this would be, what would that be? Obviously 2, and then this would be 5. I should say 2 flat 5. Flat 5 also is diminished as well. Jazz musicians tend to just write the flat 5. I couldn't really tell you why. Anyway, so classically speaking, obviously, and also jazz speaking, this is in the key of C minor, but we would analyze this in jazz as 1 flat 3 5, even though it's C minor, because we're always looking at things from the aspect of the major scale, and that's just to help us with analytics in general. So that way we don't have to worry about, you know, are we going to use the natural minor scale to analyze this? No, we're just going to analyze absolutely everything in major, and if anything's changed or altered, as we say, then we're just going to notate the alteration, so it would be flat, you know. So here I have D minor flat 5, which would be D, F, A flat. By the way, this is, of course, C, E flat, G, for those playing the home game. And this would be 1 flat 3 flat 5 in the key of D. I should also be saying that too, so there's C. And then here in the key of G, might as well just put it down there, we have the 5 chord, and just to use the same voicing, so would this be D, G, B? So in the key of G, that's 5, 1, 3 again. Now this is a different order than what I had before, but it's basically the same thing. Let's put it in order. Let's do it in the order of 2, 5, 1. So here we have D minor flat 5 to the 5 chord, which is G, to C. And we're going to, oh, I'm sorry, that was C minor, wasn't it? My bad. And we're going to use C minor, so I might as well just write that in root position. The other voicing that I had for it, let me fill in the G so I remember it. I think, yeah, we did D, G, B. So the other alternate voicing that just would sound better, to my ear anyway, would be this. Mostly because this has a lot of skipping involved, but this has better voice leading, this C minor here, because you're going from D to D flat, which is a half step, and then you're going from B rather to C, which is another half step. Now here at our D minor flat 5, we're just going to do that in root position again. So there's our D minor flat 5, and this is what both combinations would sound like. So first we'll end with our root position C minor. And now you'll hear this other inversion, the, what is that, first inversion C minor. Okay, so you guys get the idea. We could do this in a different key. If you have the key of G, and this is also another reason to know your scales, C, D, E, F sharp, G, is you'll know what tones are involved with certain chord progressions. So the same way that we labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for individual notes, we can label scales for their chords as well. So if we're doing this completely in the key of G and keeping it all the same as G major, G would be 1, A would be minor 2, B would be what, minor 3, C would be major 4, D would be major 5, E would be the major 6, F sharp would be 5, 6, 7 diminished, and then, we're back to 1. So this is why we don't use 8 on G. Anywho, so if you play all these, so this is, the 1 chord is G, B, D, 1, 3, 5. The A chord is A, C, E. What would that be? 2, 4, 6. And so on and so forth. So all we're doing is we're just building these chords in thirds. So you go from G to B to D. So there's our G chord. A 2 would be from A to C to E. And then our 5 chord would, this kind of laps again because I didn't write out the other A, but the 5 chord would be D, F sharp, A. So all we're doing is they're all just constructed in thirds. Again, I hope this is stuff you know. Alright, so now we're going to go into some rootless voicings, and I'm going to teach you guys what we call A voicings. And we'll go through a little bit of this, and again, you'll hear more music, but we're also going to basically just examine and take them apart a little bit in hopes that you'll be able to understand this stuff a little bit better. So, there are two different types of combination voicings. I don't really know how to call, I don't really know exactly what I should be calling them, but we have A voicings and we have B voicings. A voicings go for keys C through, what would it be, E. So with keys C through E, you can use this same formula. And I don't know, we'll look at it in keys C and G, just for giggles. So here, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm just going to write out a nice old 2-5-1. Now we're going to be doing this only in treble clef, and there's some other stuff I have to explain too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put D minor 7 here, and this is what a jazz pianist would play, or at least a standard voicing that a jazz pianist would play if we saw D minor 7. And those familiar with music but unfamiliar with jazz, especially jazz comping or accompaniment, are going to be like, Randy, what the heck are you doing? So we're going to explain this a little bit here. Okay, and that'll be C major 7. Now, for those who aren't used to this, I know that in Europe, the 7 with a line through it sometimes means minor. Also in Canada, the 7 with a dash through it also means minor. I just draw my 7s like that. So this here would be G major minor 7. So when you're talking about these chords, academically speaking, and you want to be very precise, what you do is you speak about the lower part of the chord and then the interval. So let's say this, I'm just going to do this in letters. Let's say we have D7, right? That would be called D major, because here's my major triad, and then this 7 would be C, which is a flat 7th in the key of D. So we would call this D major, and then we just describe the interval here, which is a minor 7. Minor 7. Now these are rootless voicings, just simply meaning the root is not there. It could be used in the left hand if you're playing piano, but typically if a pianist is with anybody else, like a bass player or something, they will play rootless voicings. So here what we do is we actually impose other voices on top. So you can see that this is D minor 7, and the weird part is even though it's a 7th, I actually have the 9th there, E, in D. So this would be in the key of D, flat 3, 5, flat 7, and then 9. So in the key of D, F is normally sharp, which is why this is a flat 3rd, and C is normally sharp, which is why that's a flat 7. But we added the 9th, which is E in this key. 9 and 2 are the same tone. We only say 9 because it denotes that it's above the flat 7th. You could also legitimately say 2nd, but it's just more traditional to say 7 and then higher numbers. So here we have G7, and yeah, same thing. We have the flat 7 that we need in G7, aka G major minor 7. But then we add an A, which is the 9th, and there's no 9th here, right? And then we have the B, which is a 3rd, and then we have E, which is the 13th. So we're playing a 13th, and all that's really required of us is G7. And then here we have C major 7, which is spelled C-E-G-B. But here we've added the ninth. So we have 3, 5, 7, 9 of the C scale. So everything here was analyzed in the scale of the chord. So using our C scale, E is the third, G is the fifth, B is the major seventh, the regular seventh, however you'd like to look at it, D is the ninth. So why are we adding these extra voicings? Well, it makes things sound better, basically. And it helps what we call the voice leading a lot too. So you'll notice, like here we have 3. In this instance, the flat 3 goes to the flat 7, and then the flat 7 goes to the natural third again. And then, you have 5 to 9, 9 to 5, 7 to 3, 3 to 7, 9 to 13, 13 to 9. So it's basically just the same motion. And granted, this is just 3 chords, but the same thing happens in different keys. So let's say, I think I said we were going to do this in G. So let's check it out in G major. So let's use the formula we have here, and I'm just going to duplicate it. So I'm just going to take this chord progression 2, 5, 1, major 7, and put it in the key of G. So in the key of G, that would be A minor, 2, 5 to the D7, and then we would have G major, major 7. So this is actually kind of more of an academic example because these voicings won't really sound that hot in the A position. They sound better in a B position because, as I mentioned, A voicings only sound good C through E. But anyway, this is just for the sake of academics, so let's just do it in G. The other reason why I'm doing it in G is because it just has one sharp. So here is, for giggles, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. I wrote out the G scale, right? So the 2 is A, 1, 2. The 5 is D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the 1 is, of course, G, right? So now all we have to do, and this is where your scales come in, you have to know the A scale. So the A scale has C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp in it. The rest are natural. So we need to find flat 3, 5, flat 7, and the ninth of A. So we're going to go ahead and write out the A scale. G sharp, A. Okay. And, we can just number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So the other thing I do for students is I extend this a little bit because it's not the easiest thing to visualize lapping around, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, okay, that's right. So all I have to do is find 3, 5, 7, 9. Well, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9. So here's my A scale. So what's the natural third? Natural third is C sharp, which means that when I need to flat this, right? So that means that my third is going to be C natural because a sharp flatted is a natural. So that's one tone out of the way. So I got 3, 5. So now I got to find the fifth of A, which is E. So now I'm going to add that in. So 3, 5, and now we have the flat seventh. So here's my natural seventh, which is G sharp. So that means that my flat 7 is going to be G natural, right? Not rocket science. And then we have the ninth, and the ninth, as I think I mentioned before, is the second, but you could even count. So A to A is an eighth, B would be 9, and then this would be 10, 11, 12, and so on. So now we have B here. Now to confirm that this is correct, we could even just look at the intervals here. They're all thirds, F to A to C, C to E, F, A, C, E. Now are these all thirds? Well, yeah, C, E, G, B. So that's another indication that this little translation is correct. Okay, so now we're going to do D. So same thing. We're going to go ahead and just write out the D scale. And even if you know your scales, it's going to help you a lot to just write them out. This is what I did when I was learning this jazz. And I'm not going to continue on with the nines and all that jazz, so we'll have to figure those out together, folks. So here's the D scale, and let's see, we have to do D7, which means if the third is involved, it's going to be a regular third. We sometimes refer to it confusingly as the natural third, meaning the third that just occurs in that scale, not meaning a natural note. So let's see here. So for our G7, we had flat 7, 9, 3, 13. So the flat 7th in the key of D would be C natural. So 7th, the 9th would of course be E. 7, 9, 3 would be F sharp. In this case, because it's major. So 7, 9, 3, and then the 13th is the same thing as the 6th, so it would be B. Okay, now, again, to check our work, we can look at just the voice motion that happens here. So all these notes stay the same, it's just C moved down a half step. So if these voicings are correct, then that one note will move down a half step, and that's exactly what it did. See, there's our half step, and then the rest remained the same. So I know that I did that math correctly. Alright, so now we're back to G, and we have our G scale up here, right? So G major, major 7. So we know it's major 7, so we're going to have an F sharp in the mix somewhere. So this guy, let's see here, 3, 5, 7, 9 would be B, 5, 7, and then the 9th. So here again we can look at the voice motion. So here we had our F go to E, we had the A go to G, the B remained, and then the E went down. So basically everything around it goes down. And that's exactly what's happened here. So basically this is just another level of transposition. Instead of transposing one chord progression, we're looking at transposing the voicings of the chords. So it's very similar to what we did with our triads. Now let's say we wanted, and this will be the last thing we cover today, let's say that we wanted to change this up a bit. For example, let's say that I wanted to do something wacky, like I wanted to have a D augmented chord, and then G, I don't know, G7, and then make that go to a C minor major 7, okay? So again, I'm just gonna go ahead and draw out, because it's not on this piece of paper, I'm gonna go ahead and draw out my regular old standard 2-5-1 voicings in the key of C. So this is D minor, this is G7, and then this is E, G, B, D. And again, this is C major 7, 9. This is G13, that's D minor 9. But this is just what pianists play, generally speaking. We'll always add something to a chord because we're pianists and we have to make things complicated. Anyway, so here we have 3, 5, 7, 9. This is 7, 9, 3, 13. And then this is 3, 5, 7, 9 again, right? So let's now alter this D minor chord to be augmented. So augmented is, 1, 3, sharp 5, right? So here we already have a flat third, so we're going to need to change that because that needs to be a regular third in that key, or the natural third in this case is F sharp. So then we have A, and we have a flat 5. A is the 5th, which means we also have to sharp that A. This I didn't mention if it was 7 or not. Let's just make it a flat 7. So then we can leave that 7 alone, and then we're also going to leave the 9 alone. So you could make it a flat 9, if it says flat 9, you would have the regular flatted 7th. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. Let's call it a 9th. So any extension like that assumes that the 7 remains flat unless otherwise noted. So unless this said D augmented major 7, 9, you would just assume that the 7th is flat. So we're going to leave it flat. And then we want a flat 9th to it. So we're going to add a flat to that E. Alright, so that's kind of a complicated chord there. Okay, now here we have G7 again, so I can just write out the same G7 voicing that I have down here, because it's the same thing, right? And now, so here's my major, but I need to change it to minor. And now, of course, all pianists know, at least those who, are above the age of, 8 years old, know that to make C major minor, all you do is flat the 3rd, right? So the 3rd in C is E, so all I have to do in this case is just change this one tone, right? Nothing crazy. So those are the basics of alterations, but we're going to get into other chord progressions, specifically the B voicings, and some other examples next time. So yeah, happy piano playing, and we'll see you next time.